being with us today.
Hopefully, my neighbor's doing construction, so hopefully there won't be too much hammering during this, but it might happen.
Okay.
Oh, hi, Edna.
Okay, I'm in. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Emily?
ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay, then I'm in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Edna. It's Emily.
Hi there, familiar voice. Okay, I had a little trouble orchestrating this, but here I be. All righty.
I find that hard to believe since I know you're on 6 Zoom meetings a day.
Tell me about it, calling the legislators as I've been in the last week. We just finished meeting with a funder, and it was a priest sitting in, and he said, "What did you do before you retired? You're a tiger." I said, "What?"
Wow, I'm not sure that's the word I would use for you, Edna, but I get the drift.
And everyone, I'm just letting a bunch of folks in from the waiting room, so we're just going to deal with that for a bit, and then we'll get ready to go. Now let's see, I've got Commissioner Arnella, there you are, Commissioner Shea, Representative Flaherty, and then Edna. Great. Okay, so I think those are all of the Councillor Flynn, those are all the guests who I'm expecting. Is there anybody else we're waiting on your end?
No, I think that's it, Council Bok.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, in that case, mindful of time, I think I'm going to get us going. So I'm going to call this working session of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bok. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the chair of the Council's Ways and Means Committee. This working session is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and also broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. This is a working session today on docket 0164, order for a hearing to discuss property taxes and assistance programs for seniors and long-term residents facing difficulties during COVID-19. It was filed by Councillor Flynn, and we had a very productive hearing on it in February, where we heard from a lot of constituents who are being affected by the increase in property taxes, and particularly about the kind of difficulty that can impose for our seniors and folks on fixed incomes. And we talked there about strategies for how to address this. We came out of that thinking that we really needed state legislation, and that we should have this working session in order to consider the type of state legislation that would be most appropriate. So I'm delighted that we're joined today by Commissioner Arnello from the Assessing Department, who was also with us and presented considerably at the hearing. Emily Shea, who's our Commissioner for the Age Strong Commission. Edna Pruce from the Mass Senior Action Council. And then State Representative Fluker Oakley, who's one of our newest state representatives in the Boston delegation, and had also reached out and offered her partnership, seeing this impact constituents on her side and recognizing the need for state action here. So I'm grateful most of all to Councillor Flynn for filing this and sort of really pursuing this and recognizing that we need action on this front. So I'm going to go to him first as a lead sponsor, and then I'll recognize my colleagues briefly in order of arrival, just so that folks have a chance to make remarks on the issue, but just reminding everybody that it is a working session and we want to get to kind of work on the topic at hand sooner rather than later. So I'll ask colleagues to keep remarks brief, but go first to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Bok, for holding this working session, and to the panelists for being here today. I also want to thank so many neighbors who contacted me regarding this critical issue impacting so many longtime middle-class working families in our city. I called for a hearing on property taxes immediately after the new year. Dozens and dozens of constituents reached out about significant increases in their property taxes this year. I wanted to work with everyone here and figure out what we can do, concrete steps to address this issue, to ensure that our seniors and longtime residents facing difficulties in paying their property taxes. I am extremely concerned that this increase puts us at a critical place for many neighbors, whether they remain in Boston or whether we will lose a big part of the soul of the city. In the hearing last week, we heard from many seniors and neighbors who come from working families and bought their homes decades ago, well before property values skyrocketed. One neighbor wrote to me last year, she previously paid under $3,000 per quarter, and her most recent bill now is over $5,600. These neighbors are not wealthy. They're facing significant challenges, an additional increase on their property taxes, and with COVID-19. With significant less disposable income, I am also greatly concerned about the ripple effect of this tax increase to our local economy. 2 years ago, I was proud to work with my colleague, Councilor Edwards, as the original co-sponsors to pass an ordinance in the City Council to allow low-income senior homeowners who owe back taxes to establish property tax agreements with the city and have a longer time paying the balance with interest relief as well. As I said at the previous hearing, at this time when so many working people are facing economic security, we as a city and a body must do all we can. Just a couple ideas people brought to my attention that I tried to include in my comments today. We should look to pause any further tax increase for the duration of this pandemic. Because seniors are facing a hardship, maybe the city could consider potentially doubling the elderly exemption from $400 to $800. Explore increasing the residential exemption as well. Look at creating an exemption for longtime residents, 55 years and older, that have owned their homes for over 20 years, provided that they meet income and other relevant criteria. Also, my colleague in the state, my friend and my South Boston legislator, City Councilor David Beal, offered some great suggestions as well. Can the city have a tax exemptions and caps, as well as changing income thresholds for deferrals through home rule petitions? Is this something the city can study? So a lot of good ideas, a lot of good suggestions from residents. Having said that, thank you, Councilor Bok, for your tremendous leadership on this issue.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. I'm going to go now, as I said, briefly to colleagues. So that'll be Councillor Flaherty, then Councillor Arroyo, then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Michael Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, be brief. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for the lead sponsor for filing. And clearly, we need to do more here, obviously, for our fixed income seniors, our lifelong residents, and for those particularly that are renting out at, either not participating in the rent gouging or renting out at below market rate. Something needs to be done to help bring some relief to their doorstep. And we've been hearing it across the city as the latest round of property tax increases went out. So anything we can do to stave that off, as Council Flynn had alluded to, maybe putting a pause on it or finding ways to increase deductions, or maybe we need to create some additional categories by way of a home rule petition. So look forward to participating in the working session and appreciate everyone's thoughts and opinions on it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Arroyo from District 5.
Thank you so much. I'm actually moving, so my camera's off right now. But in terms of what's been said, I don't think there's much more for me to say. We know property taxes are incredibly important for our residents. It actually is what kind of drives displacement often, is the property taxes. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation in terms of finding ways, specifically, I know this is geared towards our seniors, but finding ways to ensure that we're taking care of our folks. I know in Mattapan and in Hyde Park, I have a large amount of senior homeowners. And so this is very relevant for me. And I look forward to hearing from everybody on this. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Arroyo. Councillor Andrea Campbell from District 4.
I was on mute. Thank you, Councillor Bok, for holding this working session so quickly. Thank you also to Councillor Flynn for your continued leadership on this pressing issue. I also look forward to the conversation and really figuring out what we can do in the short term to help folks who have obviously immediate concerns around the bills they just received. And then, of course, what we can do in the long term. And thank you, of course, to the Commissioner. Oh, Chief Handy, good to see you. I just expanded my screen. So thank you as well for the work you're doing to respond. And Rep. Randy, it's good to see you. I also want to thank Ms. Edna Preuss for your leadership. Happy birthday again. And also I have a constituent, Iris, who's an attendee, but who wanted to be a part of the working group. If we were in person, she'd be in the room. So just wanted to flag that. Her hand is up, and I know I flagged it for Councillor Flynn. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Campbell. And I will go first of all, as was noted, we've been joined by Emma Handy, our Chief Financial Officer for the city and Collector Treasurer. So I'll go to Chief Handy first, and then to Commissioner Arnello and Commissioner Shea, sort of the city's team. Obviously, when we had our hearing, we got a considerable update from Commissioner Arnello. So not looking for long remarks today. We're going to jump right in, but grateful to the city leadership for joining us. So Chief Handy.
Good afternoon, councilors. Thank you for having us today. I'll be very brief to the chairwoman's point. Thanks for the opportunity to talk some more about what options are before the city in terms of property tax relief for our seniors. And I know you talked in great detail with Commissioner Arnello about what has occurred for the city in this tax year, and happy to talk some more about that today if that's helpful. So just want to offer up that you have a great deal of expertise here on this call from city staff, including Commissioner Arnello and also Commissioner Shea, who obviously sort of see this from the most important perspectives for the city. Obviously, I'm here in my role as Chief of Administration and Finance for the city because I feel both a responsibility to the administration of the property tax collection for the city, as well as for the overall vibrancy of the city, which of course reflects all of our residents and our businesses across the city, and is incredibly important to making Boston the place that it is. So just want to share my commitment to this issue and working with you on this issue, protecting the fiscal sustainability of the city of Boston, and continuing to ensure that our residents are able to make a positive life for themselves here in the city. So I will turn it over to Commissioner Arnello. I don't know if you want to say anything for opening remarks, or Commissioner Shea.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Arnello.
Thank you, Councillor Bok. It's good to see all the councilors here on Zoom. Hopefully one day it'll be back in person, a little more lively that way. I know we talked a lot during the prior hearing about various data points. Happy to help in any way, and happy to help figure out as we start to kind of get into more proposals, what things will work, what things won't work. Always happy to be a willing participant in these conversations and kind of plan for the future. I think the key thing to keep in mind in all this is that none of these options are without costs, right? And so anytime we're looking to provide relief to someone, there is another person that's paying for that relief. And so it's important that we always keep that in mind in the conversation. I also have some data that I didn't have available to me last time about comparing the average single-family home tax bill in Boston to surrounding communities. I don't need to like read through all that right now, but very quickly, the average tax bill for a single-family home in Boston was $4,281. That was for the entire fiscal year, for fiscal year 21. The only communities that are near us that are lower than that are Chelsea at $3,300 and Everett at $2,900. Every other community around us is higher by a pretty fair margin. But happy to get more into that data if there's any interest there. Happy to talk about whatever you guys feel like. I also have some answers to some follow-up questions from the counselors in the last hearing, but I don't have to kind of get into all that now, but I'm happy to whenever it makes sense.
Great, perfect. And we'll definitely, yeah, any of that you have also be great if you'd send over, and we'll make sure it circulates to the whole committee. I want to just finish out the administration panel by letting Commissioner Shea offer any opening remarks. And then I do want to go to Representative Fluker Oakley, who's joined us, and also to Edna, who's joined us on behalf of Mass Senior Action. And then we'll jump into kind of the meat of discussion. So Commissioner Shea.
Great, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today. So just a real quick overview of what my office does is kind of related to property taxes. So we operate the city's property tax work-off program, which is the program where our older residents can work off up to $1,500 of their property taxes. Obviously, the last year has been really challenging for that program, but I'm excited to say that we did have 23 residents who did virtual opportunities with us and remotely worked off their property taxes. So that was, I think, that was good. And we look forward to even more folks being able to participate this year remotely, and then when they can in person. Also, my team down at the Age Strong Commission is trained to help people with the applications, with the exemption applications. You know, I know that we're talking today about what more we can do around property taxes, and I think that's so important. But I also want to let people know that we have very low uptake on people that are actually accessing the current programs that we have. And so I would ask for all of your help in working to promote those programs. We work really closely with assessing around that. And just a couple of examples, this year we just sent a calendar out to an Age Strong calendar out to about 80,000 older adults across the city to their homes. And we promoted all different sorts of programs that people can access that can help them and help to reduce costs. And so we promoted these programs in that calendar. We also worked this year to promote the programs in all of the local papers. Since we're unable to kind of get out and be with people in person, we put ads in all of the local papers about the programs, and in a bunch of the ethnic newspapers like El Planeta, El Mundo, Sampam, and the Boston Haitian Reporter. And then that was in November, so that they could kind of, you know, it's good to get it in before January 1, although folks can continue to apply. And then in February, we did the same thing, really promoting the state's senior circuit breaker tax credit, which is another significantly underutilized benefit for older adults. So just ask for all of your help in helping to get the word out about all the programs that we do have, and also looking at what else we can do for our older residents. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Shea. And yeah, we really appreciate all that you do. And I agree. I think when we've been talking about this, it's been definitely with the two-pronged, like how do we get more people to use the existing programs, but also recognizing that a lot of the folks we've heard from are not eligible for the existing programs. And so we want to find ways to help them. I think actually I'm going to go, if it's all right, to Ms. Edna Pruce next. And then I will go to the representative, because the representatives brought some ideas to the table, and I want to kind of get those in the mix with the ones from Councillor Flynn and kind of get us to that work. So I think it'll be more efficient if we go first to Edna. So Edna, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon to all of the councilors and to you, Chairperson Bok, for this working committee. My name is Edna Pruce, and I am the president of the Massachusetts Senior Action Council. We are a statewide organization led by seniors. We have 6 chapters across the state, with Boston being our largest chapter. We work collectively to improve the lives of seniors and our communities across the Commonwealth. Can you hear me? There's a blue thing on my screen, so that's why. I am a Mattapan homeowner, and today I am serving as a surrogate to the thousands of Boston seniors who struggle with the rising costs of housing. Massachusetts Senior Action Council members formed a senior property tax subcommittee. Our committee has identified several areas of inequity in the assessment process, and we hope that we can help you come to some solutions. Just let me say, as I list very quickly a couple of points that we want to bring to your attention, that I am a prime example of the people that are being impacted by this. I turned 88 reversed yesterday. And if you're over 50, you'll understand what I mean. If you're under 50, you'll probably have to go to your little iPhones to see what I mean. I have lived in my home since 1975. So I am a long-term homeowner. I will say very quickly, there's 6 points that we spoke to.
Miss Edna, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I've just gotten word that the sound might be out on the YouTube stream of this, and I don't want your 6 points to not go heard by the public. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you in the middle, but
okay, now on my I'll just.
So we can hear you fine. It's not an issue on yours.
I just went out. I have to go out and come in again, I believe. Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you great. It's not you.
I can't see anybody, and I don't know what I did, but I will finish my points when you say that I can, and then I'll go out and come back in so that I can see everybody. Because as you know, we are technologically challenged at our age.
Well, I think today it sounds like the city of Boston is also technologically challenged, because the stream on the YouTube has just gone out, and I'm going to ask for everyone's forbearance for just a couple of minutes, because I think that from the public perspective of these hearings, if people can't hear what we're saying, it doesn't really count. So just give me a minute to try to figure out how we're fixing this. I think this is a new problem. So I guess I'll formally say this hearing is going to stand in recess for a minute or two.
Dare I go out and come back in?
Sure. If you think that'll help on your side.
You can see my face?
We can see you and hear you.
Oh, you can see me. I can't see you. Let me see.
Yeah, maybe if you try the view button at the top right-hand corner, it might say there's like a gallery option.
No. Says current user. Well, I will wait, give my points, and then go out and come back in, because I would hate to miss this moment.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
Now I can hear.
Yep. Counselor Mejia, welcome. We're just standing in brief recess because the sound went out on the.
No, I could hear everything. Y'all couldn't hear or see me either. So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm happy.
No, that was just because you were in attendees, but we're fine within the Zoom. It's the YouTube sound that's having an issue right now. So I just missed you come in. Sorry, Counselor.
Wonder why I can't see anybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm back in.
And we can hear and see you.
Thank you very much. I don't know how I went out, but I'm back in.
Counselor Breadon, welcome. We're just standing in recess for a couple of minutes. There's an issue with the live stream sound on the YouTube side. I want to reassure everybody who's participating that the Zoom is recording just fine with all of the sound. So the public will ultimately be able to watch everything and hear everything that people have said so far in this point at the hearing. So that has been recorded and is safe. It's just that the live stream sound's having an issue, but and it seems to be a city hall side physical problem. So dealing with that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, testing, testing. We think the sound is now live on the live stream and on boston.gov. I'm just waiting for a confirmation text from someone. Anyone? Candace, Carrie, Emily. No. Okay. I'm okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Testing. These are the things they don't tell you about when you sign up for city council. All right. Sounds like it is going through. We're all set. Okay. So I'm going, for folks watching, if anyone hears of somebody who still isn't getting the sound, they may just want to refresh their stream. Sounds like that could be an issue for people.
Council.
Yeah.
Council. So when this goes on Boston cable television, it will go on without the interruptions, I think, right? If they're able to edit the program.
They should be able to. I'll get confirmation on that. But they're definitely, everything we said is going to be saved. Worst case will be if they have to wait for this bit, but hopefully I'll talk to Carrie and Candace, Councilor Flynn, about getting that piece cut out.
Okay, then maybe us councilors and other people can post on social media when the program will air on cable television as well.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, okay. So with that, I'm going to call us back from recess. So for now, reconvening the hearing, and we're going to go back to Miss Edna. And I think we were at the point of the 6 points that you were going to raise. So looking forward to continue your testimony.
Thank you. The first one is that Massachusetts seniors have the highest rate of income insecurity in the country. 6 in 10 Massachusetts seniors do not have the income to make ends meet. And Massachusetts ranks 50th at this time. We went below Mississippi last year because of the high cost of living in Massachusetts. The main contributors to senior income insecurity are the cost of healthcare and housing. The upkeep of older housing is tough. And as I just told you, I've been in my house since 75. Mortgages are paid off, but the tax assessment is inequitable. If seniors did sell their home, there are not affordable options. The waiting list for senior housing is an average of 6 years. Property taxes are not equitable. The assessment policy should evaluate the individual property. The assessment policy should factor in long-term homeowners. Unrequired development burdens long-time homeowners by inflating home assessments. Next door to me, a young man just rehabbed his house at the tune of at least, I'm sure, $300,000. That's raising probably the cost of his house triple what my house would be today. The current exemptions do not address the problem, and the process is too complicated. The income eligibility is too low. $78,000 is the median income in this city, yet the income for relief for property tax exemptions is less than $25,000. Income eligibility should be at least 80% of the median income, which is 66 would be $66,000. So the process is cumbersome, and many seniors cannot navigate the maze and cannot afford professional tax assistance. And then just to mention a couple of other states that have either done a tax freeze when the owner turns 65, lowers the assessed value with deductions. And two examples of other states are New York. The senior exemption is 50% of your home's appraised value. Houston, Texas, deduction of $160,000 off of assessed value is done, plus 20% reduction off of that tax amount. So, and lastly, we know there are in entities in the state who have the means to pay more, but are not required, we feel, to pay their share, or in some cases, pay any tax at all. And a good first example are the universities, in the area. So thank you very much. These are concerns that I'm bringing to you as part of the population that is going to be affected and is being affected by the estate taxes. And this year, mine went up another $400. And as I said, I'm 88 reversed. So I'm living on don't go to your cell phones. I'm living on a fixed income. So I speak for citizens throughout the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Edna. We just hugely appreciate your testimony on behalf of all those you represent and yourself, and just a belated happy birthday, I think, from all of us on the council. I want to go now to Representative Fluker Oakley, who, as I said, has been concerned about this issue and recognized our need for state partnership. And I will just flag before we go to her that one of the things that Commissioner Arnello really highlighted for us at the last hearing was the fact that every time there has been relief, like real sort of structural property tax relief at the state legislative level, it's been led by the residents of Boston. From classification that even lets us charge a different rate to commercial versus residential properties, to the creation of the residential exemption, and some of the work that Councillor Flynn alluded to, just in terms of the programs that we even have. So I feel like what we're engaged in today is in a long-running tradition, and something that we can be hopeful and purposeful about moving forward. So Representative Fluker Oakley, we're so glad. It's always great to have somebody join us from the state level, especially on something like this that requires collaboration. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Bok. Good to see you, Councillor Flynn, other honorable members of the City Council, to the commissioners, and Miss Edna, it's always a pleasure to see you. Happy birthday. I hope you're enjoying your special week. I did send a written testimony out to the Ways and Means Committee, so folks should have access to that. I'll just talk through some high points and then happy to engage in whatever conversation might be helpful. Do want to reiterate what Chairwoman Bok said, and that is that I want to be a partner, knowing that this impacts so many of our residents. Councilor Mejia, so wonderful to see you as well on this afternoon. Basically, I am state rep of the 12th Suffolk. In the city of Boston, I represent parts of Hyde Park, Mattapan, and Dorchester. And we already know what the problem is here in the city of Boston. It's a high cost of living and expensive housing. And as development and construction occur, gentrification and displacement often follow. Right now, our current property taxes follow a regressive model, which means that we end up squeezing and penalizing those longtime neighboring homeowners like Miss Edna and other seniors across the city, community members who may not be seniors just yet, but have owned their home for 10, 20, or are seniors 30 or more years, don't necessarily have a way to offset the cost of their property rising, and our seniors are on a fixed income. One of the headlines to some of my proposals is to have a more progressive property tax structure. First, we can prioritize longtime residents. I do suggest reaching out to the state to see if it might be able to provide an additional subsidy for folks who have owned their homes for 30 years, 25 years, 15 years. We can find a number that makes sense. But what we're trying to do is, as new developments crop up, we don't want to push out and displace those who have already contributed to that community for such a long time. Related to developers and luxury condos and home ownership, they should be able to pay their fair share. So we know that when new developments are built across the city, what ends up happening is that they raise the tax base for the entire surrounding properties. So what would it look like if the city of Boston separated out the tax bracket for those existing structures? So like Miss Edna's home that's been sitting there for 50 plus years has its own tax base versus a new development that was just created in the last 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever number makes sense, has its own separate tax base. So that way the homes that are driving up the assessed value for everyone carries the burden of that assessed value. The other suggestion that I have is related to the elderly exemption eligibility, which would require partnership with the state to raise the income limit, because where it's currently set is too low for our seniors who have moderate pensions or retirement plans. And we want to be able to have our longstanding community members retire in their community and in the hometown which they have created and developed. The other thing that we know happens, again, as a result of state law, is that there's no double dipping or more than double dipping, shall we say, as it relates to the exemptions. And so we don't want to ignore the intersection of two qualifying characteristics. We want to be able to provide full relief to someone who, yes, has their personal exemption, but might also identify as both disabled and elderly. How can we find a way to compound those and provide that support? I am not naive that all of these things cost money in order to make them happen. And I understand how our tax base does provide the important services that we need for our community members. And similarly to what Ms. Edna has already suggested, we know that the issue of the pilot program has come before the City Council on several occasions over several years before. And certainly we think at this moment in time, when the people who are feeling the squeeze and the crunch are the longtime homeowners and citizens of our city, that it might be time to evaluate to have those universities and hospitals pay their fair share to offset the cost of some of these expanded programs. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Representative. And I do want to stress the memo that that she circulated has been circulated to all the counselors, so you should have that in your inbox. And I want to appreciate you for coming to the working session with some concrete ideas. And I know they're very much in line with some of the things that Councillor Flynn mentioned in his opening remarks. I feel like some of the same things are emerging here. Before we dig deeper into the conversation, I do want to give Councillor Mejia and Councillor Breadon a chance just to say something briefly, since they arrived after I did opening remarks. So Councillor Mejia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councillor Bok and Councillor Flynn, for working so hard to bring the voices of the constituents into this conversation. Thank you as well to Edna for holding on and still working through the technical difficulties to ensure that we're hearing directly from those who are most impacted. Really do appreciate your patience with us. And of course, my sister in service, State Representative Brandy, let me stop. Let me see where I'm at, because I'm going off script right now, Fulker Oakley. So this was not part of my script, but I just want to shout you out and just thank you for bringing your voice into the space too. Let me go back to my script before my team like, what you trying to do here? So our office has had the opportunity to sit and listen to the CP&A meeting discussing these property taxes. And we also took part in the hearing that followed. What we're looking to get out of this conversation is some concrete action items that we can take on as a body to ensure that the people who live in their homes are able to stay in their homes. And so really looking forward to hearing what that's going to look like and the conversations that follow. So thank you so very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Mejia. Councillor Breadon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for my tardy arrival. I did I'm really very excited to be part of this conversation. We have so many elders, seniors in our district who are really struggling with the increased cost of our real estate taxes. And I hope we can come up with some actionable items that will help relieve that financial stress and help stabilize the situation so that those folks can continue to live in our city and continue to contribute to our wonderful city in their retirement. So thank you all for your testimony, and thank you, Miss Edna, and happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess I've heard a few different things from Councillor Flynn and from Representative Oakley, and I think they're in line with the things that people are kind of expressing general interest in, and with a bunch of the points that Edna raised. And so I sort of want to understand, this is sort of a question for you, I think, Nick, like in terms of data, because I think, we would want as a council to draft something to be a home rule petition, and then to know, to Chief Handy's point, sort of what the net impact is. So we know kind of how many people would this actually help. So I guess what I'm curious about is if you could tell us a bit about, like, I think both Councillor Flynn and Representative Fluker Oakley mentioned the idea of something for long-time homeowners. Does the city have data that would let you pull, like, who's the set of people who have, like, people who claim the residential exemption and have lived in their house for more than X number of years? Like, is that the type of thing that we could pull from assessing data?
So the quick answer is not from assessing data, no. So the data that we track is really about the property attributes and not about the attributes of ownership. And so it makes the kind of analysis that you're talking about a bit challenging. It might be that that's something that Age Strong has, maybe not tied with ownership, but maybe just tied with the city overall. And maybe we could try and figure out a way to kind of use that to cross-reference or use census data or something. But in general, we don't keep track of that data, and you probably don't want us to keep track of that data, honestly. So especially when we're talking about seniors, we get a lot of requests to provide information about lists of individuals who qualify for some of our senior exemptions. And we do not provide that information because the details of people's exemption applications are protected and private, and we want to make sure that we're keeping people's individual information protected and private so that they don't become subject to various scammers and phishers trying to get data of our most vulnerable residents. And so I'm very cognizant of trying to not create public records that would essentially create a list of residents in the city of Boston over 80 that have $500,000 worth of equity in the property. Like, I don't think that is a super useful list to have be available to anyone publicly. And so our focus is really on property attributes and not necessarily who lives in the property. And to be quite honest, like, your age and your amount of income that you have, or the amount that you have in your savings account, really doesn't tie to what the value of your home is. But it's interesting to try and figure out how do you identify that population that might benefit from the kind of programs that we're talking about. One thing that I do want to mention briefly, because I know the concept of a progressive versus regressive tax came up. Our current taxation scheme, based with using classification and using the residential exemption as examples, are set up to be very progressive. So that the lower the worth of your home, you're paying a significantly smaller tax rate once you qualify for the exemptions than for a higher valued home, or an apartment building or a large commercial building. And then when you take into account the application criteria for the various exemption programs that we offer, those are also limited intentionally to people with lesser means and lesser savings to kind of address some of the issues that we're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean that those income levels can't be revisited. And I think that is worthy to discuss and figure out what's a reasonable basis, and that, you know, some of those limits have been pretty low for a pretty long time. And I took a quick look at the exemptions, the personal exemptions that we've been giving out over the past few years, and the numbers have been dropping, which is weird because every year we send out applications to the same group that qualified the year before. So if the numbers are dropping, it's either that people are kind of graduating out of the program, and so they no longer meet the requirements, or they're just not around anymore. But it's very strange, and it might also be an outreach conversation, figuring out how to get more information out there. It could be a combination of both of those things. But I think we definitely have the ability to increase some of these programs, and it's just figuring out the right limits so that we're helping out the folks that we want to help out. I think it's also probably important to mention that it'd be great if everyone could be a homeowner and have the ability to access home ownership, but there's a large part of our population that does not have that means or that ability. And so when we're talking about relief, we are already kind of talking about relief for a group of people that is lucky enough to be homeowners. And so when we're thinking about the city's residents and who we're helping, that's just something that we should keep in mind as well.
Yeah, great. No, thank you. And yeah, I think on the info front, I mean, the question, I take the point about not wanting there to be a list. It would just be good to sort of have think about whether in the rest of our data world, there's a way to estimate like what number of homeowners are in that category. Because I think if someone were actually applying for a exemption, they could raise their hand and be like, I am someone, you know, who has lived in this house for a long time and I want the exemption. And it's not like we have to have a complete list of those people in order for people to raise their hand. But I do think obviously for understanding the impact, you want to know that. So I guess just two questions from me, and then I want to go to colleagues. So one is just to Commissioner Shea, and just to follow up on what Commissioner Arnella just said. Do you get any sense anecdotally whether, like, are there a lot of people who reach out to Age Strong who think maybe they qualify for some of these exemptions and then find out that they don't because the income limits are too low? Like, does that seem, because I mean, instinctively, it seems to me just because of cost of living increases and everything that like, it would make sense that if we've left those at a fixed number in state law that, you know, that fewer and fewer people are going to qualify for them. But I'm just curious whether that bears out anything you see when you work with seniors.
I mean, I need to check in with my team on the specifics of that. I mean, I think that the amounts are fairly low. So people also may be self-selecting out of them before they even seek to apply for them. But so I'm not sure I can answer that question. And I wouldn't say we get an extraordinary amount of people that call and say, I want to apply, and then they're not eligible.
Right. They may just be maybe just be filtering out. Everybody's talking to each other and saying, oh, it's too low to work. Yeah. And then I guess just before I go to colleagues, I wanted to give the team here, like, if you have any comments on what I've heard as sort of proposals from Councillor Flynn, and some of the, like, you know, views that he had collated, and also from Representative Flaherty Oakley, was, you know, the idea of something that could, you know, just pause an increase for COVID. So like, we're not going to increase people's property taxes next year. The idea of doubling the elderly exemption, the idea of expanding the residential exemption, this long-time residence thing, right? So trying to give it, I think the representative raised the idea of could we, and granted, right, that all these things require state action. So like, you know, so the representative raised the idea of like, some kind of differential rate for new housing stock or like new construction, raising the income limits, which we were just talking about, and then the idea of people being able to double up on multiple exemptions. So that's, I think, 7 things that I just listed. So it's a lot. I'm just wondering if there's any like, you know, flags or comments that you wanted to get into the conversation on any of those right up top. I know, because I know in particular Chief Handy's is short on time. And then I'm going to go to colleagues for like more specific follow-up. So just anything that comes to mind.
Thank you. So I guess I would say at a high level that things that, and Nick should feel free to disagree with me, because this is my sort of initial reaction. Things that are within the sphere of adjusting exemptions, doubling the exemption, adding new exemptions, are probably, we understand the impact of those quite well, right? And to Nick's point, right? In a lot of cases, we have some data in the city that can help us further understand sort of what that pool might be, or, though they are not inherently linked in sort of the property type records that Nick's team is managing. But to me, those seem like the way to target the types of population that we are here today to talk about. I think when you think sort of more broadly about pausing increases or creating new classifications, that has a broader impact on the overall property tax structure for the city of Boston that would be very complicated, I think, for us to understand all of the impacts related to it. And it also, I suspect, would benefit many types of either individuals or businesses that we are not talking about, you know, trying to assist over the course of this conversation today. So, you know, I think, and I will also say, right, the sort of the construct of classification and what that looks like is obviously something that every city and town uses. It's consistent across Massachusetts. Obviously, there are these sort of opt-in provisions for new exemptions and things like that. Boston, obviously, really prioritizing the residential exemption as a good example of sort of cities and towns using these tools. But I think anything that sort of gets at what the overall structure looks like and changing that overall structure probably starts to impact just the way that we're collecting revenue in a way that we would really need to make sure that we understand, and may not be that targeted answer to directing the assistance to the population that we're here to talk about today. And I think, you know, just sort of to highlight the point that when we talk about the increases to property taxes year over year, the thing that increases the levy is overall city spending restrained by 2.5% growth, right? So it's not that that is governed basically by this sort of macro structure that property taxes are governed by, and the experience that I think some of the testimonies and comments pointed to is around the individual value changes for homes, and you know, all of that process and value setting is really set forth in terms of not only how the state requires that we do it, but also sort of a and Nick could probably speak to this much better than I can, sort of a general theory of how to do that in a way that is fair and equitable, and make sure that assessors in particular are not biased by things that they see and interact with every day in terms of setting those values. So that's a very important sort of piece that has to be upheld to make sure that the work that they do is consistent across the board. So those are just my initial reactions. I think, you know, talking about what types of changes to exemptions could be elevated at the state. I know, I believe that we've recently gotten back on the schedule of doing these annual cost of living updates for some of our exemptions, but there had been a period of time where Boston just was not doing that. And so making sure that we're both caught up to date on that, but also examining whether that goes far enough, whether those income limits are the right income limits. You know, some of the things that you all have raised, I think, are good places for us to think about sort of what would the impact of those be, and is that getting at the heart of the issue that you're raising?
Great, thank you, Chief Handy. Yeah, so I hear you sort of worrying about the, you know, capping on increasing period, also because obviously it would affect, you know, big buildings owned by banks downtown and that kind of thing too. And the idea of a classification on new construction, but maybe some of these other things, doubling, expanding exemptions, changing income limits, adding new ones for longtime residents, making multiple of them. I think one that Councillor Flaherty alluded to and was raised by several of our folks at the last hearing was also the idea of maybe doing something for, to Ms. Edna's point about how buildings are assessed, trying to do something for like the type of like owner occupant, like landlord who gives their tenants like a major break on rent compared to like market surrounding rents. Cause we have this weird situation where folks are getting taxed as though they're like charging the market rent in their neighborhood. And then they're actually providing some of our like sort of informal affordable housing by charging these lower rents to longtime tenants. And there's like no reward system for them in our property tax system. So I know that was another suggestion that had arisen.
I will just add to that, you know, the structure, and again, Nick can probably speak much more eloquently on this than I can. The structure of property taxes is not the most friendly place for us to sort of make catered and targeted adjustments to benefit a specific population. So something like you just raised, Chairwoman, is a great idea, I think, for a program, but I think rather than sort of being a property tax carve out adjustment, et cetera, it would be most easily targeted through the system, well, outside of the system of property taxes and through something like a standing program, a D&D or something like that, right? A sort of rental assistance or rental offset or something like that, rather than, you know, the work of assessing is sort of narrowly targeted at they are literally setting the values for each individual home. And the bill is actually another department's responsibility that is a function of sort of the levy over the value. And so the series of facts and information that you would need to have to cater a program like that and have the impact that you're intending just doesn't fit nicely within the sort of singular focus of setting the value of a property. I don't know, Nick, if you agree with that or disagree with that. Obviously, feel free to disagree with me.
No, I think, I mean, you probably don't do yourself service. You speak to these things a lot more eloquently than I think I do sometimes. So I think those are excellent explanations. I think, you know, it's we have a lot of talk about equity, and currently the way that our tax statutes are set up, they really are kind of meant to drive this like across the board equitable nature in which values are tied, no matter who you are, to market value, and that those rules that are in place that have been longstanding rules, there's a lot of value in having those longstanding rules because they keep me or one of my employees or some other person from kind of putting their thumb on the scale and being like, oh, here's my buddy, I'm gonna have your value be different. But because we have to meet these requirements from the state and we have to submit all these reports for backup, that kind of prevents that from happening. It's a natural way to kind of make sure that everyone's being treated fairly. And then it's driven by the data that goes into our model. And that's an accuracy thing. And we are always working to make that data better. Anyone that ever has an issue with the value of their property or their data, I would much rather they reach out to the department, and so that we can have that be right. I don't care how many phone calls we get. I don't care how many abatement applications we get. What I care about is that we have accurate data and that we're doing what we should be doing and that it's appropriate across the board. One thing that I wanted to mention, because I know we're talking about increasing exemption amounts. So for fiscal year 21, the 41C exemptions, one of our elderly exemptions, the administration and the city council actually did vote to increase that. So that was capped at $750 and we increased it to $1,000. That was something we did back in June that all y'all help with. And that's the base level of that exemption increase from $750 to $1,000 for the year. And then with the Boston doubling program, that actually means that the maximum you could get goes up to $2,000. There's some some math that kind of goes into that. But we have kind of been working to make those programs stronger, and definitely happy to keep having conversations and figure out kind of what else we can do to make them better programs. And I think right now, probably the fastest, easiest thing to do is to kind of look at the income limits. And I think that's a really good approach, and see if those have gotten too far out of line with what's realistic.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go now to Councillor Flynn, and then it'll be Councillor Campbell, and then Councillor Mejia, and then Councillor Breadon. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councillor Bok, and thank you, Commissioner Arenello and Chief Hanby, and Representative Oakley and Representative Beal as well. Edna, happy birthday. It's good to see Commissioner Shea. I guess my point is, I wanted to make, from feedback from a lot of my constituents, is we see these developments taking place, ongoing developments in our city on residential blocks. And it certainly helps the economy of Boston. It increases the value of people's homes. But what it also does, obviously, is it increases the property tax. So an elderly person, as we discussed many times, an elderly person who might be retired from the city on a fixed income can't compete, can't pay that property tax as the person that just bought a $1.5 million condo and that works in downtown Boston as a in business, making $200,000 a year. So that's the equity that we're trying to figure out. And during these difficult years in the 50s and 60s and 70s, these elderly people were working so hard in the different Boston that was barely surviving, but they helped build this city to what it is now. So we want to make sure that there's a place for our seniors. I'm all about getting something done. I'm all about making improvements, however we make it, whether it's a whole rule. So I guess my point or question to Nick or to Chief is, how can we accomplish something that helps the homeowners of the city? What's the best way to do it? What's the best recommendations? We have great recommendations here. We have great suggestions, but the final analysis is, how do we make something happen effectively, efficiently, that benefits the longtime homeowners of Boston?
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for your question. So I think certainly, I guess to echo what Nick just said, thinking about sort of what the structure is of the current exemptions. I know this is something that Commissioner Shea has been working on for a long time, thinking about what other opportunities exist, and where have other communities done more that we could sort of look at and figure out whether we can pattern after them. I think as Nick laid out last time he spoke with you all, we've done a lot on these topics in Boston, but there's more to be done. And so thinking about what that structure of a home rule would look like, I do think, to sort of go back to that prior conversation, things that fundamentally alter the way that the sort of overall structure of property taxes works in Massachusetts, again, are probably more likely to receive an unfavorable welcome up at the State House than things that deal within the sort of the paths that we've created either here in Boston or in other municipalities around exemptions and things like that folks are familiar with. So I think the question is around how do you target that exemption to meet the issue raised today, and what are the various components of that feel most responsive to the concerns that residents are raising, because I think I'm sure you talked about this the last time, but so much of what is happening this year is in part a function of this 5-year revaluation that we have to do. So we're required, as we sort of alluded to, the work that assessings do is heavily regulated by the state in terms of sort of how they set values and what that looks like, and it's approved by the state. So a lot of what residents experience this year in this year's tax bill is the function of us doing this basically 5-year revaluation that was required by the state. And also just sort of the overall shifts in what's happening in the city of Boston in terms of where value exists between residential and commercial and things like that. And those shifts and those sort of updating evaluations because of the schedule are really what drove the experience of taxpayers across the city, and less so on the sort of individual overall tax burden in terms of the sort of levy itself. Because again, that is governed by this relatively modest increase of the 2.5% sort of bandwidth. So I think what would be helpful to hear more about over the course of this conversation is just what is the most important piece to target, if we are able to target an exemption, either an existing exemption or look at other communities for things that we are not yet doing, are there places where there seems to be consensus that would have the greatest impact for our senior residents in the city of Boston? I don't know if that answers your question, Councilor, but.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for taking my question. Councilor Bok, I have additional comments, but in the interest of time, I'd rather other people take the opportunity to weigh in. So no further comments from me at this time.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And as the lead sponsor, I'll definitely come back to you at the end if we have an opportunity. Let me go now to Councilor Campbell, and then it'll be Councilor Mejia, Councilor Breadon, and we've also been joined by Councilor Michelle Wu at large. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Bok, and thank you everyone for the questions and commentary so far. I guess for me, where I'm a bit frustrated is, we scheduled this working session to create a space for all of us, of course, to come together and to think about what we could do in the short term and in the long term, right? To help these residents that we are hearing from every day with respect to their property tax bills. And so obviously some are seniors who are on fixed income, veterans, and others. And maybe I've missed this so far, but there are some ideas on the table right now with Rep. Randy Fluker-Oakley, obviously, who's here presenting some ideas of things she's trying to push at the State House through a home rule petition that maybe we support, right? That's already filed up there versus even coming through the council, or I don't know, but she's clearly pushing some ideas that maybe are more long-term on the State House side as wanting to be a partner with us on these issues. So I guess the question for the administration, and maybe this is for you, Commissioner, as well as you, Chief, is in the short term, and maybe the response is there's nothing we can do. I hope that's just not true, but what can we do right now to help our constituents who continue to call and email us with respect to their bills, right? And then what are some of the long-term solutions? And I think one, obviously Councilor Bok lifted up one that came up in the hearing before around, landlords who are providing tenants with, a really affordable places to rent, including the folks who are very much on the Zoom who live in my district. And so how do we support them? Other things long-term, but what can we do right now? Because it's really hard to respond to some constituents with, it's just hard to say there's nothing I can do. So hence why we're having this conversation to figure out what are some things we can do as a collective to offer short-term relief and long-term relief, particularly in the midst of COVID.
Sure, I'll start, and then my colleagues in the city should obviously jump in. I think, Councilor, I hope this does not add to your frustration, but I think on most of our programs, I believe on all of our programs, we are maxing what the sort of state authorization is for those programs. So to do more on the exemptions, et cetera, would require additional state approval. And so, that notion around sort of what can we do to target homeowners who are offering affordable rents. That's why, both because property taxes don't get at all of those details, but also because we would have to go to the state for approval to do something like that, sort of taking it from the revenue side of the ledger to the spending side and saying, is there a program we should stand up to do that, is probably the speediest way to get at that. And that is, this is the first time I'm having this conversation with you all. So that's not something that, I've thought about sort of what are the details we would need to do to turn that into a program. But I think because of the calendar of property taxes, because of the need to have state approval of these things, because we've already sort of maxed all of the things, and I'll confirm that, but my belief is we've maxed all the things that the state has allowed us to do. There is a little bit of an inability to unilaterally act as a city in terms of doing more on that type of programming answer, which is why we need to do it through state partnership. Commissioner Shea, do you want to say anything more to that?
Sure, I can just add to that, Chief Handy. So we did take a look at this through our Age-Friendly Boston project in partnership with UMass Boston Gerontology Institute, the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging. They looked at all of our exemption programs and where we were based on kind of what the current state law allowed us to do. And then some opportunities that would require changes in state law. With a couple of things that assessing work to do this year in collaboration with you all. We have now maxed out all of our programs, so the chief is right. There's beyond taking the regular COLA increases that we're allowed to do. There is nothing more that we can do kind of with our with the exemption amounts that wouldn't require a home rule petition, a change in state law. So that's where we are right now. So but I think that doesn't mean that we can't look to see what we can do or what we want to put forward to the state. I know that people are having these conversations across the state. Obviously, Mass Senior Action Council is a statewide organization. Mass Councils on Aging is also an organization that's always interested in property taxes and older adults. So I think we have some allies to work with across the state and with folks like Rep. Fluker Oakley. And so we can all, I think, work together around this.
I just say something?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Bruce.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say, and as I hear you talk, I get a sense that in many ways you feel your hands are tied. But if you come up with a couple of policies that you would like to change, then, Mass Senior Action would go into its mode where we visit every legislator
Mm-hmm.
with the facts and the concerns of the council to try to bring change about something specifically. And we've been able to do that with the Medicare Savings Program. That's our modus operandi across the state. All of the members visit every legislator in support of whatever particular action that we as citizens would, like them to bring forth in legislation. So I hear you all say, well, there's not much we can do. That's the way it is. But the only way you can bring change, we found, is through collective action. And one thing we really need is to raise the income requirement as well as the number of exemptions that one can get. But that's what I would say, that
That's right.
if you come out with one or two things that we can support, we'll put our little collective senior power to, try to encourage the legislatures to pass such.
Can I just add to what Ms. Bruce just said, just because I want to make sure that on the income piece, to answer Councilor Campbell's question about sort of what can we do right now, we have recently done, this collective group, council and the mayor, what we can do on an annual basis, right? Which is to raise it based on cost of living. It's the sort of sizable increase beyond anything that's sort of a cost of living increase that we aren't able to unilaterally do as a city. And so that would be the type of thing where if everybody was on the same page about that being the area of most impact, and we took that to the state that they could approve for us, and we could move forward with adjusting our program to reflect that.
Yeah. The mayor cost of living increase is so low on an already very low income requirement, you know, that a lot of people can feel it.
Well, that was, I mean, I see Commissioner, I'll let you respond. That was my only question, was just folks who are tuning in, of course, we want to be able to report back to them short-term things we can do to offer them immediate relief, and then more long-term solutions. So I'm happy to support home rule petitions or other policies, of course, but it sounds like even some of the long-term ideas we could actually maybe actualize or implement sooner, maybe in a short-term way through an initiative versus a change in tax structure, right? So even that speeds up the timeline on some of these ideas, which is great. But I still think, you know, that's what constituents are waiting for, the short term and the long term, and us being able to report back. So thank you all for your response to that question. And Commissioner, I'll let you finish, and thank you, Councilor Bok.
Thanks. Yes, Commissioner Arnold.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. I just wanted to kind of get to your point about short-term versus long-term. So what your constituents can do right now is, you know, go on our website or reach out to our Taxpayer Referral Assistance Center and see if they qualify for a program that they're not already getting, right? So the deadline for residential exemptions, the deadline for the personal exemptions that we're talking about, that's April 1st. We haven't hit that deadline yet. So there's still time for people to get applications from us, fill them out, get them into us, and then we can make sure that everyone's getting all the programs that they qualify for and taking advantage of those programs. So we still have time for that to happen. So if people are calling you and they're like, hey, you know, what am I gonna do? I can't afford this bill. I would direct them to us to see if there's a program that they might qualify for that they just might not have known about that could be a big help. You know, and for example, one of those programs, so there were two big things that we did last year. One of them was increasing the 41C base exemption amount from $750 to $1,000. So that's an exemption program for seniors. The other big thing that we did was there's a senior deferral program, so 41A program, and we lowered the interest rate on that from 4% to 1% going forward. I completely understand that people might not be interested in taking out a loan to pay their taxes. That being said, 1% is an interest rate that individuals cannot get anywhere else. That is the best deal going. They don't have to defer all of their taxes. They can just defer a portion if they want. They can pay them back when they want to. They don't have to wait until the property sells. And so that really does provide flexibility for that immediate, like, what do I do? I can't pay my bill right now. I don't want to not pay my bill and then have the late interest charges that come on that is much, much higher than the deferral interest. And so like that is a viable option that I would push people that meet those age requirements to actually seriously consider, because it really is, I think, a good thing that the city did with the city council's help in passing that adjustment and expanding that opportunity. I also want to thank Ms. Bruce for her comments and, you know, the availability to be able to help and push forward agendas in terms of activating her group. And I also want to thank, I believe your group has invited me to kind of talk and listen to your ideas on Thursday at your meeting. And so I'm really looking forward to that, to hear what ideas you guys might have for us and how you can help make us better. So I'm really excited about that. But to Councilor Campbell's point, changing legislation really is a long-term plan. Because at minimum, we're talking changes for next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 22. And so that doesn't really address like the what do we do right now today issue. So for the right now today, call our Taxpayer Referral Assistance Center, 635-4287. Go to our website, boston.gov/assessing, see if there's stuff that you should be getting that you're not. And if you qualify, we want to make sure that you get into those programs.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I see Commissioner Shea's got her hand raised. I'm going to go to her, but then I want to get to Councilor Mejia and her question. So Commissioner Shea.
Sure. I just have one other very quick thing that when UMass looked at this, they said the same thing. Like we can and we should work on a state level to make changes, but it's not going to do a lot if we don't get more people to take up the programs. Because right now there are a significant amount of people that are eligible for these programs that are not accessing them. So we both need kind of a behavior change, as well as to look at how can we help some folks that currently, where currently the income and asset levels are too low for them.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Shea. And I do just want to underscore for folks, I think we have to approach on both fronts. And I think that a home rule petition, although we've learned, Councilor Campbell, to see it as a long-term solution because of how long they often take up at the State House, I don't think we have to accept that it's a long-term thing.
That's
I mean,
right.
yes, it's not going to operate for this fiscal year, sure, but I think we should be aiming for next fiscal year. And I think like to go into effect, right? And I think to Ms. Pruse's point, right, there's lots of people who I think are ready to be part of the coalition to make this happen. I think that the same constituents who talk to us as counselors are talking to Representative Fluker Oakley, Representative Beal, all like, right, our state representative and senators, and are saying, hey, this is, this really is not tailored to acknowledge my situation, right, and the desire to keep these long-term residents in the city. So that's why the real aim here today, I mean, I think it's good to articulate some of the things that might be well suited to programs and things we could talk about for this year's budget. But I do think we want to start that process. We want to get a home rule up to the State House sooner rather than later. And I think Councilor Flynn's intention with a working session is to like move us towards, we don't have that legislation in front of us yet, but which of these exemptions is it going to include, right? Because there's really, to me, there's sort of three types of things we could do with a home rule. So there's the really big changing the tax structure stuff. And I understand what Chief Handy's saying about things like, if you create a new classification or you say pause property tax across the board, regardless, there's both the fact that it's probably very broad and it hits a bunch of the people we don't mean to help necessarily, and it doesn't help some of the people we do, but also just the chances of it making it through the State House at a speedy basis are slim. Then there's the category of a lot of the things that people have mentioned today, which are changing the existing exemptions. And that seems like something that we might be able to kind of build that statewide coalition for quick action, because everybody's hurting in COVID, right? And so that's the things like doubling the residential exemption, doubling elderly exemption, right? Like doing the income limits higher, letting you have multiple exemptions. And I think part of the question for me, honestly, is are we looking at a home rule petition where we try to bundle all those things? Are we looking at separate home rule petitions because we're going to see which of these goes? Is there something that we want to file as a city council that maybe Representative Fluker Oakley would carry? Is there something that another representative would carry? I know she's indicated a willingness to do that. And I'll let her say something in a sec, but that's, that's sort of to me, a big piece of this working session today is about narrowing in on which of those things would go in a package. And that's where I've understood as the chair, Councilor Flynn, to be trying to drive this conversation. And then I think the sort of third category would be creating new exemptions, right? So something that isn't the residential or the elderly. And that falls into that question about like, is it a long-term homeowner thing? Is it a landlord thing? And that again raises the question that Chief Handy pointed to of like, well, should we maybe just do a D&D program to try to target those folks on the, like you pay your property tax, but then there's some kind of a program that's supporting you on the other side of the city. So that's my understanding of where we're at. And it's a little bit weird. It's always weird to do a working session without the legislation in front of you yet. And that's our situation here today because we're still operating off of a hearing order. But I think that's the goal, is to get to legislation. Did you want to add anything, Rep. Oakley, Fluker Oakley, before I go to Councilor?
No, Madam Chair, you said it perfectly. I just want to make it known that I'm here to be a support should this body decide they want to file a home rule petition. More than happy and willing to do so. So just want to make sure that that's clear and apparent. And thank you again for allowing me to be a part. Councilor Mejia, you're so patient. I'll let Madam Chair call on you.
Yes, sorry. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to always learn all these rules of engagement because you guys have conditioned me to the 7-minute warning. And then I'm like that kid that once those 7 minutes have come up and my turn has not, I get anxious. I'm like, so is this a new order now? Like, so you got to let me know the space that I'm in so I can manage all of my expectations because yeah, Bok, I don't know about you. I need those rules of Robert's.
You're right. I didn't start out today with a 7-minute limit. So we're operating under a looser framework.
And then I got my daughter rolling up on me every minute, like, yo, no, I could keep telling her lies here. So thank you for finally letting me speak here. I do have some questions. And I just want to say to Ms. Proust, like, I love Mass Senior Action Council. You know, I really love the fact that you are helping us understand that when there is an appetite for change, there is nothing that can't stop us from doing what we need to do, right? So I know that for me, I feel like you go over here, you ask your mom for $5, she sends you to your dad. You ask your dad for $5, he sends you to your cousin. Like everywhere we go, when it comes to the things that we're trying to push forward, it seems like we keep just getting pushed from point A to point B. And like that level of accountability is always hard to find as to who has the power to make these things happen and how do we go about getting there. So I can understand and appreciate the frustration, but I'm really happy to see Councilor Flynn and Councilor Bok holding this space so that we can get to that. So my hope is that from this, we can move. And I'm really happy to see my sister here, Fluker Oakley, State Rep, here in this place because we have all of the right players in this conversation for that to happen, right? So thank you again for being here. I have a few questions. One is, I'm just curious, you know, with this whole idea around the assessors, Commissioner Handy, you had talked, or I think it was Nick, one of y'all, I don't know who, somebody said something about the assessors. I'm just like, if that's something that, when it comes to property taxes, right? I always think about when a new property is built that's city owned and it's built on a street that has had long-term homeowners for the last 30 years, and then a nice shiny new city of Boston build gets put on that block, the property taxes for that entire block is impacted by this new shiny building that just came up on the street. Is there a way, when we're thinking about planning and development, for us as a city, so this we don't have to ask permission to our parents at the State House, is there a way from an accountability standpoint for us as a city to do a landscape analysis of who are the long-term homeowners on that block, and then provide them some sort of exceptions or some sort of like support so that their property value is not impacted by these new shiny buildings that are popping up on their block? Is that something that as a city we can be proactive about? I'm just curious.
So a couple of things, Councilor Mejia, thank you for your question. In general, and I just want to add like a little bit of a clarifying point. So if there's like a new shiny building built on a block, that does not instantly raise everyone's taxes on that block because there's a new building there. If the new building, because if you don't change your building and the new building doesn't actually make your home more attractive because it's adding some sort of benefit to the area that would make someone want to pay more for your building, your value isn't going to go up because of the new building. Your value goes up because someone wants to pay more for your property. And so it usually doesn't have that direct of a cause and effect correlation where like one new building, depending on what we're talking about, there is a possibility, right, where you could have a block and someone builds a new building next door to your house, and it makes your house look worse relative to the new building because someone would rather have the shiny new thing than have your old historic building. So it's not that clear cut that just because there's a new building, your taxes are going to go up because you're the neighbor. Now, if someone built like a new T station and people want to live next to the T station, then your value is going to go up because your home becomes more attractive because it's easier to access public transportation.
Right. So that's the point that I really want to, that's the thread that I want to follow a little bit more as we think about displacement and gentrification and development in low income communities, is that when Starbucks starts popping up and shopping malls and all of the things that make our neighborhoods a little bit more attractive, then those are the things that impact our long-term homeowners, right? So my question then becomes, what safety nets, right, are we thinking about as we think about planning and development, and how intentional are we being about supporting homeowners as you're thinking about the landscape of how things are changing? So that's kind of like the thread that I want us to just kind of really think about, and not to say that I have any bright ideas of what that will look like, but I just want to name that is the sentiment, whether you are a homeowner for the last 50 years or you're a homeowner for 10 years or 20, is that all of the development that's happening across our neighborhoods do impact the people who are homeowners. And there needs to be some sort of mechanism in place to support the development without that increase. So somebody has to pay for it. I don't know who, but I just want to just name it, and not to say that we're going to solve it in this conversation, but I just think it's something for all of us to consider, and the accountability factor and what role the city can play in planning with a purpose and making sure that those sort of the homeowners are not impacted by the attractive tea station and the beautiful parks, and now you can actually have a dog park, right? All of these beautiful enhancements impact the property value, and therefore impact our residents. So I just kind of want to name that. You don't need to answer. I just want to throw it out there for all of us to ponder on. But then I do have two specific questions here. I'm curious about the people who may qualify for benefits but do not know that they exist. For example, veterans or people with disabilities who own their homes but have never applied for a subsidy. How does the city do outreach to community organizations and other government organizations on the state and federal level to inform residents of these subsidies? Because let me just tell you, there's lots of programs that exist that the city of Boston are champion, but those benefits are not reaching the everyday homeowner, right? And I know you guys have put things out via email and social media. I think that we need to think about non-traditional ways of communicating with folks, whether it be through the newspaper, whether it be through PSAs. I mean, I think that we need to do a better job at sharing information so that everyone has access to the same information at the same time. And I just kind of want to just put that out there, something to think about. I'm curious what efforts are made around outreach, specifically to those folks who don't have access to digital internet, or who may not even have a phone. I mean, my mom always talks about her little Obama phone that she can't even, like this, that's what they call it, when you can't send text messages and things like that. So I just want to I'm curious about what that looks like in terms of outreach. And then the last question that I have, and this is to Representative Fluger Oakley, are you aware of any stipends that the state already offers when it comes to subsidizing long-term homeowners? So
not to my knowledge, Councilor Mejia, but my staffer teammate Chris is on the call, and we'll do some research and circle back to your office directly, but not to my knowledge.
Great, thank you. And then I'm being mindful of time before the gavel comes up. Just curious if anyone could just talk to me a little bit about your outreach efforts, especially for seniors. I mean, that's who we're here to talk about today, but we have to recognize our privilege in terms of access to the to technology.
Mhm.
And I'm so happy to see Mass Senior Council on Zoom. Like they do their Zooms, like they got that down packed, but like, I'm just curious about, you know, what else are we doing to disseminate information?
Yeah. So I'll just say briefly from administration and finance that we do obviously do some outreach through mailings with tax bills, et cetera. We've been more intentional about that since working with you all on things like language access. So thank you for your partnership in that. But by far the best tool that administration and finance has in terms of our outreach to seniors is our partners, the H Strong Commission, because they have so much communication and connection with seniors across the city. And they have a dedicated staff that works with us both on a sort of calendar basis to figure out when things are when we're getting better information about who might be behind or what issues might be arising, but also just in terms of proactive messaging and communication out to residents across the city. So I will turn it to Emily for that.
Sure. So I can let you know some of the things that we've done in the past, Councilor Mejia. I talked to I spoke to this a little bit before you jumped on. So I'll just do it briefly. So this year we put out a calendar to all of our residents. So we mailed about 80,000 calendars out to people's homes, and we tried to pack them full of information on programs that older adults could access, including the property tax exemption programs and the senior circuit breaker tax credit. We also ran for the month of November, we ran ads in local papers every week about all of the exemption programs. So we ran them in the Hyde Park Bulletin, the West Roxbury and Roslindale Bulletin, the Boston Bulletin, Bay State Banner, Dorchester Reporter, the Beacon Hill Times, the Boston Sun, the Regional Review, which is the waterfront, North End, downtown, and Charlestown Patriot Bridge. We also ran them in El Planeta, El Mundo, Sampam, and the Boston Haitian Reporter. So that's where we put this year, because of COVID and our inability to kind of get out and be with people in the community, we ran ads about the exemption programs and also about the senior circuit breaker tax credit, both for the month of November and for the month of February in all of those places. In the past, we've gotten out to neighborhood association meetings and kind of Mass Senior Action Council meetings and everywhere else that we can get out and speak with folks.
Before I get, I got one more minute. Councilor Bok,
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Mejia.
So I just kind of really want to follow up on that. Emily, I'm just curious in terms of focus groups. Did you guys work with Mass Senior Action Council to help you develop the messaging, and did you all get solicit input from them so that they can help inform what it was that you were going to be rolling out? Like, what role did they play in helping you shape? I know we have Age Strong, but I'm just curious, like, have you done any focus groups? Have you worked with seniors directly? And not all the seniors are part of everything. So I'm just curious, like, in terms of just developing your content, what role, if any, Mass Senior Council played in providing you some feedback?
Sure. So we have met with Mass Senior Action Council before, but we didn't do it specifically around kind of the campaign ads that we put out. But always happy to get their input and feedback on everything. So Edna is part of our Mayor's Senior Advisory Council, and certainly value her input as well as everyone else's.
Well, then you're in good hands. As long as Edna's in the house, we're good then. I'm curious, Ms. Pruse, what feedback and would you be willing to provide in terms of how we can better engage and provide whatever information is coming down the pipeline to our seniors? Any ideas that you'd like to share with us?
I can't, other than certainly meeting with our weekly groups, meeting with meeting with our weekly groups or conferring with the executive committee about ways that we can disseminate information. I don't have, yeah, that would be the first step. That would be the first step. With our chapter meetings, where people can spread the word through the chapter meetings, through our mailings, and the reason that you hear me hemming and hawing is because we plan everything strategically and we act collectively. So we would sit down together and decide the best way to disseminate information.
Thank you for that. Iris, you have your hand up, and okay, I'm gonna give the floor back to Councillor Bok before she shuts me down and puts me on mute. But I'm just saying, thank you. That's it, Councillor Bok.
Would not do such a thing. No, grateful for your questions, Councillor Mejia. And yes, I see that Iris's hand is up. Iris, do you want to speak briefly and then I'll go to Councillor Breadon, or do you want me to go to Councillor Breadon and then to you? Fine, either way.
I just had a quick question about how the calendars actually, how we got names for the calendars to be sent out. Where did that list come from? 3 of them came to my house, and granted, no, it's okay. There are 3 older people in my building, so that was fine. Although my husband and I don't need 2 of them. But still, I'm curious as to how you knew who those seniors were. Because it would seem that if there's a list of those people out there, then those people should be followed up. People should follow up with those people to see what services they could take advantage of.
Sure, I can. So that was from the list that the elections department has, and the addresses were supposed to be deduplicated, so you shouldn't have gotten 3. But I'm glad to hear you did, and I hope you have friends you can pass them to.
Again, there are 3 people. I mean, I've got a tenant who's so it would go directly to him, and then whatnot. I did pass the extras around, but still.
Thank you, Iris. I want to now go to Councillor Breadon. Councillor Breadon.
Thank you. This has been a very helpful discussion. Let's try and figure out some solutions. I'm just looking at the income and asset levels really do seem to be too low, like 24,834 for an individual and 37,251 for a married couple. If that's just over $2,000 a month coming in, and I know that seems like a lot, but that's probably I know there are elders who are living on less than that, and they're maybe not homeowners, but that seems like a really low income level to be assessed at. So that may be somewhere to start with to try and increase that income and assessed asset level. I don't know how doable is that, or is that a huge impediment?
So we would have to work on a home rule petition or change to the general laws. So it would require legislative action, but I think that that it's probably due for an update, and it might even be something that would have broader appeal, that it wouldn't have to be a home rule petition, and that we could have it apply equally across the state, and so we won't end up in a situation where Boston has a different rule from other communities, because that stuff can get confusing.
Do you know when was the last time it was updated?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay, and this is one for Emily, and in terms of the work off program, I don't know how many elders. I know we had COVID last year, so it probably didn't happen even in 2020. But how many elders access the work off program and are able to get some credit for their real estate taxes?
Sure. So this is another program that we wish more people would do. So glad we're on YouTube and we can get the word out there about it. But last year we had 23 people during COVID who were able to do it and complete it. We had just over 2,000 hours of volunteer service completed through that program. But in a typical year, we usually have somewhere between 60 and 65 people do the property tax work-off program, where folks can work off up to $1,500 of their property taxes. We do have room to expand that program. So certainly we could have more people doing that program. On the flip side, we would need to also create additional volunteer placements for people within city departments.
Yeah, I think one issue for folks out in Alston Brighton is that there's not that many work off opportunities. So it's difficult if you as a senior, if you have to get on the T and go into town and it takes you an hour going that way and an hour coming back. It's a big undertaking. So I think really being creative about developing some more volunteer opportunities for those folks who are able to volunteer and do the work off program. I think it's a good way to go. And just making sure that we have equitable access to that across the city as well would be an important consideration. Councillor Bok, that's all I have for now, but thank you.
So much, Councillor Breadon. And Councillor Wu was with us for most of the discussion. Unfortunately, had to go. But I know it also has a staffer on and is tracking this. I think everyone on the council is hearing the same things and wants to figure out how to get this like targeted relief in a way that doesn't undermine the city's finances, but really helps the people who need it. So I think I just want to, now that we've sort of run through questions a full time and we're also getting close to the end of sort of 2 hours, which is usually where we try to limit our working sessions. I think a lot more helpful textures come out of this from my perspective as the chair. And I think kind of the next step is probably to work with the lead sponsor around an actual piece of legislation to file on council. But I just wanted to give folks an opportunity for any final follow-up questions, but also any comments on the kind of, when we think about, increasing the elderly exemption, I think we've landed on the income limits definitely need to go higher. I think there's probably also an opportunity for folks who are within those income limits to think about what the relief looks like, and then for our elderly exemption in general to think about whether it could be a bit more generous. Those are some of the things that have come out of this for me, and maybe having a follow-up conversation with D&D about the long-term resident piece and the sort of generous below market landlord piece, but whether there's a way for us to support them without going up to the State House. But I wanted to see if there were other things that had come out of the conversation that anybody really wanted to highlight before the kind of lead sponsor goes off to think about, a draft piece of legislation that can come before the body. So I'll take blue hands or physical hands of any further comments on that score. And otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Flynn for some concluding remarks. Oh, and I'll also check for public testimony. So anyone in the Zoom? All right. Let me just check. Candace, if you're on the line, do we have anyone signed up for, or Cora signed up for public testimony?
No, I don't. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Cora. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, no, I don't think I have anyone.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just say I do see a few folks in the attendees room. So if you're here and you're looking to testify publicly, if you could just raise your blue hand. I'll wait for a moment on that front. Okay, seeing none, I think I'm going to go to Councillor Flynn for concluding comments, and then I'll just underscore that I think I'm certainly hopeful that working with the lead sponsor that we'll be able to have a piece of legislation before the body sooner rather than later. We'll end up that will just for people to understand process. This began as a hearing order, which is what we do in the council when we identify a problem and we want to understand it better. And we've been really grateful for our administration colleagues and the advocacy community, like Ms. Edna here today, and also Ms. Iris and all of the folks who came and spoke at our prior hearing for helping us understand the texture. Then the next step in the council process is filing an actual piece of legislation, a home rule petition. And then that instead of coming here to the Ways and Means Committee, goes to the Government Operations Committee, which reviews all pending legislation. And then that would then move towards a vote in council. And then in the case of a home rule petition, where we're asking our state partners to let us do something, we would send it up to the State House. So that's the partnership that we've been talking about a bit today. So that's just a little bit of process clarity. And now I'll go to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Bok, and thank you to you, Councilor Bok, to the representative, the Chief Handy, and Commissioner Arenello, and Representative Oakley, Commissioner Shea, and the others, and Edna and Iris. I just got an email from a neighbor in South Boston, John. He lives up near St. Bridget's, but he just wanted to weigh in. He said his property tax goes up even if he doesn't make home improvements, and the actual property is what the developers want, not their home. Basically, they want to tear down the structure. That's the value of. That's why his property taxes are going up. So I told him I'd read that into the record. So again, want to say thank you to everybody for being here. Again, Councilor Bok, for your leadership. I understand the calendar and how in the short term, the focus should be on outreach and take advantage of existing programs in deferral programs. But I continue to be interested in both raising caps for exemptions and creating long-term homeownership exemption. I understand there's budget and revenue considerations about how much we can raise for each, and what income levels are we going to aim to keep our seniors and long-term homeowners here in Boston. That's critical. They play a critical role in our city. They help build our city. The city workers, the retired or state workers, but they've worked hard their whole life, and we need to make sure Boston's a place for them as well. We also support those who give unofficial affordable housing to keep family, friends, neighbors in the city as well. So I want to thank all the panelists for being here today. Let's work together on short-term initiatives, long-term initiatives, and maybe make some progress in getting some relief for elderly homeowners critically needed in our city. Thank you, Councilor Bok.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn, for your leadership on this and those strong comments, pulling it all together. And just before I adjourn, I just do want to thank again Representative Fluker Oakley for being here today. I know Representative David Beal sent comments. We really appreciate partnership. It's the only way we're going to get something done on this front. And in a similar spirit of partnership, thanks to the administration, to Chief Handy and Commissioner Arenello and Commissioner Shea. I think we've all got to pull together, and as we've heard from folks like Mass Senior Action and Ms. DuPont and everybody who was at our last hearing, it's something that our constituents are really looking for help and relief on. So we'll definitely be continuing to be actively working on this with the goal of making the long-term piece up at the State House more short-term. That's got to be our goal. So. Thank you all. With that, and I still haven't seen any public testimony hands, so I think with that, this is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.